Hello my soccer universe and welcome to my year-end review, the top 10 moments of 2025. These are the moments that moved me the most this year. These are the moments that made me fall in love with the game even more or still keep me with this game that I love so much, even though since ever I started watching it, it has changed so much. But I picked here 10 moments, and again, I don't want you to see this as a strict countdown. Yes, the top 3, that's a clear 1, 2, 3. But everything else, I tried to actually get a story arc in there as well to make it even more interesting and, to make everything a little bit sense. During the video, I'm gonna wear for each segment a jersey that will represent that section quite well. And then I hang them up in the background so we have a background of memories in the end. And yes, background, the scarves have no meaning for that. I just kept the scarves from one of my last review videos up there. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not listening to this on the podcast, there are scarves in the background that may or may not make any sense to you. They are just there for decoration. So let's get this out of the way, and I want to first start with 5 moments that I had in contention but that didn't quite make it. The first one of this was the Ajax collapse towards the end of the Eredivisie season, when before that PSV had collapsed, Ajax were clear at Easter. Then they lose to Utrecht and boom, and PSV are still champions. The second moment is that Sporting pipped Benfica twice to a title. There was this second to last round. Benfica Sporting. Sporting needed at least a draw that they can win it at home. Benfica needed the win to have the advantage. Sporting hang on to that draw. And then they went on to win the title, but also in the Taça final. Sporting were outplayed by Benfica, score late equalizer and win it in overtime. Must be really tough to have been a Benfica fan. The Club World Cup, yes, this was close. This was really close to making it. I, in the end, actually got into the tournament. However, I still have major questions about it. And so, yeah, Chelsea won it. It was even not the right winner from my point of view. I mean, I don't want to take it away from Chelsea, but in a way, everything about it didn't quite just feel right. And yes, when there was, I think, Benfica against Boca, that was the highlight that, yeah, okay, this is a real tournament. And then I actually watched a lot of the knockout stage. And there were some great performances in there. PSG, for instance, against Bayern and against the Real Madrid. The final was a letdown, but there were quite some good reasons for that. And then the everything after. And I don't know if we really need a Club World Cup in that format. And, just taking out the life of the best competition in the world, which is the Champions League. Didn't like it. In the summer, we also had a major transfer window, and I look especially what the Premier League did, outspending everybody, and none more than Liverpool, although Liverpool also sold a few players. But then those transfers, at least as I'm shooting this video, haven't quite worked out. But I always said they're building for the future, but of course this adds to the anxiety. And the last thing, and yes, this impacted me a whole lot, but I didn't want to have it in the camp because of all the mistones around it, was the World Cup draw. I mean, the World Cup draw is interesting, and it gave me a podcast episode that was very well received overall. And for that, I do like it, but nah, that quite didn't work out the way I wanted it. It was just drawn out, just get us the pots. It's a half-hour thing. We don't need to drag out for 2.5 hours and give out piece prices and so on. Okay. Let's move into the top 10, and for me, one of the moments of the year was an unexpected one. I never watch underage tournaments, but if the Austrian national team is doing well, that grabs me. It was also a 48-team tournament, and Austria made it all the way to the final. And while the group stage and maybe the win against Tunisia in the round of 32 was not something to talk home about, beating England 4-0, that was a marker. Then going over Japan and Italy into the final. In the final, then yes, you play suddenly in a bigger stadium. You play against a team that is more experienced at that level, and you could see the nerves were showing in a way. But this was the first ever final that an Austrian national team made of any level in any gender. So that was actually a pretty big story. Happened in November. Huge echo here in Austria as well. Those players are already stars, even though most of them probably will not make it to the next level. But it definitely showed that actually in Austria, all these players are playing actually in the second league. So they actually have experienced against bigger opponents. Well, didn't join the final, and I still say the final goal, the winning goal for Portugal, was offside. Didn't quite work out. And yes, it was unlucky, but overall Portugal was the deserved winner of said World Cup. There was one summer tournament that actually did grab me a little bit more than the Club World Cup, and that was the Women's Euro. It was actually quite a fun tournament in Switzerland. Sold out stadiums, great atmosphere, everything that the Club World Cup was not. And it actually was a quite enticing tournament because the huge favorite Spain did actually not win it. And it was a tournament where, yes, there was always a team that was maybe more proactive. But in the end, the team had to work hard to either move on or they got ousted. And then add to it that Italy actually did perform well. Austria did not qualify. And that actually made this tournament quite interesting to me. And as a little bit of a final shock, England won that one against Spain. Echoing also that Arsenal beat Barcelona in the Women's Champions League final. But just a few highlights. I mean, the knockout stage was crazy. We had the penalty shootout between Sweden and England. I really thought that Sweden were the better team there. England moved on. Italy then upset Norway. Moved on, played England, and England beat them in extra time, but Italy really had the chances to actually move on to that final. I really felt that they were hard done by. It was a very late equalizer by England, and then it was only gonna go one way. But even in the lower branch, France outplayed Germany, but France, whenever they play against Germany, they do lose. France just do not have the attitude to beating a team and actually move further into a tournament, and Spain actually also had to work really hard to beat Switzerland, and then Spain outplayed Germany again, but needed an overtime winner by Bonmati to finally get to the final, where, as I said, they were the better team against England. There's no question about it. Took the lead, however, Russo equalized in the second half after England had been outplayed, and England make it all the way to penalties. And even though they missed the first penalty, Spain's penalties were atrocious, missing 3 in a row. England actually win that one. And you know, if you win back-to-back championships, yes, you might have been outplayed in the final, but then it was a deserved win. And so yeah, England, that was the summer of England in a way. And in at number 8, we have to talk about the final of the losers in Bilbao between Manchester United and Spurs. Both of them have been atrocious in the Premier League, finishing 15th and 17th. However, in Europe, they were just better because they have more means, they have better squads, and even with B squads, they could roll into the final. And it could have been such a great story. I mean, with Bodo Glimt making it all the way to the semi-final, they ousted, for instance, Lazio. Had some crazy games in there, so a really deep run by the small team up from Norway. Even got me then a jersey from theirs. And United ran into Bilbao, and Bilbao were so set on reaching the final at home, only to be completely outplayed by a United team that was absolutely nowhere in the Premier League. And so it's the final in Bilbao, and it was one of the worst finals in recent memory, I have to say. It was won by a goal by Brennan Johnson, where we still don't know how he went in, or maybe it was finally given to him. It was maybe more of an own goal. And that was the only shot on goal for Spurs. And United then had their chances, but Van der Ven, saves on the line, I think with a bicycle kick or something like that. Spurs really worked hard. Ange Postecoglou made true on his promise that in his second year he wins a title. They put all in on the title. So once they knew that they couldn't get relegated anymore, and Spurs couldn't get relegated, I mean, just that sentence makes no sense. Then they went all out for the Europa League, and they did win that one. And their trophy drought. This was a major trophy for Spurs, and it was so nice to see Heung-min Son finally lifting a trophy, and actually a quite major one at that. It was also kind of the late spring, summer of Chelsea. They won the Conference League. They were way too good for the Conference League, even though Betis gave them a little bit of a challenge by the second half. Turned to another level, and Chelsea were just better than Betis. And then they also went on to win the Club World Cup against all the odds, but they ended up in the more convenient branch of the draw, and so made it all through to the final without, being that challenged by major forces as their opponents PSG were. We stay in England. Crystal Palace won the FA Cup thanks to Austrian coach Oliver Glasner. And not only is he Austrian, he's Upper Austrian. And he made his coaching career at my favorite team, LASK. And that makes it really, really special. Now he won his second trophy. The first was the Europa League with Frankfurt. Now he went to England and won the FA Cup against Palace, beating Villa in the semi-final, I think 3-0. And then Manchester City in the final. And that was actually a pretty big achievement. Yes, it was not pretty. It was Eze scoring one goal and then they hunkered down, had also a little bit the rub of the luck with, some refereeing decisions going their way. But in the end, they won their first ever title. And Oliver Glasner is now seen as a demigod in South London. Although, as I'm shooting this video, he's probably not going to renew his contract. Because Oliver Glasner doesn't work with a sporting director well for more than 2 years. That has always been his problem at LASK. He made it 4 years because he had full control of everything. So that's something that one should learn when you hire Oliver Glasner next. But he is gonna deliver. But it was also a year where there were other trophy droughts being ended. We had, for instance, Newcastle winning the League Cup. I don't care too much about the competition, but Newcastle fans surely did, beating Liverpool in the final. The Go Ahead Eagles won the Dutch Cup, beating PSV away from home in the semi-final. And then AZ on penalties in the final. I think it was penalties, if I remember correctly. So that was a huge story. And they were not wearing their home jerseys. They were the purple ones. And then maybe this hurt me a little bit more, although I can fully respect what they achieved. Bologna also won the Coppa Italia and was almost a 50-year title drought for Bologna as well. So, good stories there too. At number 6, and after this very England-heavy portion, we are now moving on to the Italian portion of this countdown. Napoli won the championship. And I have to say, the way that the Maradona erupted when McTominay scored the opener on the final match day, when everyone knew now they're leading 1-0 against Cagliari, that's gonna happen. It was just amazing scenes. I mean, yes, it probably didn't have the emotional weight that the first Scudetto after this long wait post-Maradona had, but this was one that was won on the last match day. So that made it special. It was played in Naples, the flares went up, it seemed like Mount Vesuvius was erupting. And yes, the Serie A season did not grip me as much, and more on that later. However, we had a title race and it went down the wire, although at many times it was a snail's race. Inter and Napoli couldn't be separated. Both times they met, they played 1-1 draws, and it was Conte who actually reformed this Napoli side. Yes, out the big stars. Kvaratskhelia left halfway through the season. Osimhen did not make the squad. However, he brought in McTominay and others from England that suddenly worked. And McTominay is now a star in Naples when he was more or less a joke at United. Tells you, if you put trust in one player, it really does work. And McTominay was the player of the season. He was outstanding. And I think he absolutely enjoyed being there in Naples and made for a really, really great season of his. Napoli were probably the best team because Inter in the end just looked tired. And yes, Inter fans will look at some penalty decisions, not going for it. They were blah, 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 blah. Whiny in a way. Inter, of course, and we'll talk more about Inter later as well, were in all 3 major competitions and ended up being in second or not making the final, for instance, for the Coppa Italia. So that adds to me as a Milan fan, but that was one of the few rays of hope in a rather dour 24-25 Serie A season. Okay, in at number 5, and you're watching this on video, you're seeing history. For the first time ever, I have put in this jersey after I have it for almost a year in my collection. The Milan 125-year anniversary jersey. I've avoided wearing it so far, but I decided for this part I put it on. Okay, this is the first time where I'm the fan and I'm talking as the fan, and I have to tell you, Milan's year, I went from excitement to complete apathy to a slight glimmer of hope to even more apathy, then for more hope and a potential title contender. At the end of this year, I don't think Milan are the top favorites for the Scudetto. However, they can do a Napoli. Napoli won their title because they didn't have Europe, and Conte works perfect for that. Milan have the same luxury. They even managed to get themselves out of the Coppa Italia, which is ridiculous because it would have been even better to win a double because it doesn't add as many games. But yes, Milan kind of made the turnaround with a coaching change. The year started, or the previous year ended with a coaching change. Fonseca out, Conceição in, and he comes in, wins the Supercoppa. Not a tournament that I care too much about, but if you beat your two main rivals in that one and coming back every single time, then this is something special. At least it feels special. You were 2-0 down against Inter in the final, you turn it around and Tammy Abraham wins it in overtime. However, it didn't translate into the league, and it was one poor performance after another. There were bust-ups, and after a great performance, there usually came a bad performance, and Milan then ended up finishing in 8th spot. And because they lost also the Coppa Italia final to Bologna, this meant no Europe for Milan. Yes, maybe it's better no Europe. Champions League, okay, Europa League. I wanna win that effing trophy. That's the one trophy, now the Conference League as well, that Milan have not won. So I want to win the trophy, but maybe in the current state it was better to not be in Europe. Although, who knows. But the club seemed a complete mess. Fan boycotting the last few games. It was eerily silent. And it remained so even at the beginning of the season. However, the club at least got their act together. Ibra was a little bit demoted. They got in a sporting director in Iglitare, who actually made an interesting transfer window. It did not go all perfectly, but he made some wheelings and dealings that worked well. Luka Modric came in from Real Madrid. He's the best player in the league at age 40. You got Massimiliano Allegri. Yes, it's not pretty what Milan are playing under him, but they are now in a run for a potential title. Allegri plays Allegri style. I mean, I like that we win the big games against the big teams, every single one of them, except for Juventus, where we should have won because Pulisic missed the penalty. And Pulisic is, other than Modric, the player of the season. The way he's scoring, I mean, there could be an argument made that he's the MVP of Serie A because even though he's missing so many games, his record, goal scoring and goal contributions record, is out of this world. But you know, everything got a little bit more solid. Even the players that were so defensively bad in the spring, the same players are actually now quite tight. When it goes up against big opponents, against the small ones, you still F up. And this is what has me worried. This is why I think Milan is not quite yet in the title race. But it actually feels good for Milan to be up there. And I think Champions League is a realistic target and is a target that Milan will achieve. And then maybe you can attack next season. Although it will be tougher because you have this distraction of Champions League. As I said, every Milan fan is hoping that Milan will do a Napoli. It's not impossible. The signs are there. Napoli have now 2 games a week because of the Champions League, and Conte is not doing relatively well there, but Napoli are hanging about. Inter had the change to Kivu. Actually works much better than everyone expected. But also Inter can get distracted, and while Inter might have on paper the better squad, the rest that Milan have is truly an advantage. If you just can beat the smaller teams. I mean, Milan is the team in Serie A that has lost the least games, but 5 draws. Inter lost 4 times, but have 12 wins. And that's why they're 1 point ahead. That's the one thing. But you know, I hope Allegri will figure out, if you figure out the striker position, and I don't necessarily mean get one in, although they just got one in, but if you figure out the striker position, at least in the play, and you know, put players in position to score, then I think you're in for something. And you know, maybe Rafa Leao playing would also help this team a whole lot. As I said, I'm closing out this year with optimism for Milan. I really hope it stays this way. But I cannot accept another season without Champions League. And honestly, a trophy is overdue. You cannot have Inter win another title. Then they're 2 ahead of you. This is something that cannot happen. So if anyone other than Milan should win, let it be Napoli or let it be Roma. But we'll see about that. But in any case, I'm going with optimism. I think Milan could win a title. Not 100% sure that they will. Okay, for number 4, let's shift our focus over to World Cup qualification. I have to say the November finish to World Cup qualifying, especially in Europe, was something special. Austria got the job over the line. It was nothing glorious, but it ended a drought since 1998. Similarly, Scotland also ended the drought on the same day since 1998, but in way more spectacular fashion. We talked about McTominay when we talked about the Napoli title. McTominay again put Scotland in the lead against Denmark. And I have to set this up properly because Scotland got the draw in Denmark. Then had kind of an up and down campaign where it was anything but convincing. You lose to Greece on the second to last match day. However, Denmark only managed a draw at home to Belarus, a team that they had beaten, I think, by 5 or 6 goals just a few weeks earlier. So that actually gave Scotland a lifeline, and they had to beat Denmark at home. And beat them they did. And the way they beat them, it was spectacular. It was, nail gripping, everything. It was so exciting. And I didn't watch it because I watched Austria, which was also exciting, but it was nerve-wracking. The Scotland game, if I was a Scotland fan, I probably would have died to heart attacks in that game, but it was really exciting. And especially it was exciting because the goals that Scotland scored. One better than the other. I mean, Scott McTominay scores an bicycle kick to open up the scoring. Denmark managed the equalizer with a penalty. I think that was just a joke, but then equally a joke was that they had a player sent off. Then I think it was a corner that went directly into the net to give Scotland the lead again. However, Denmark again managed an equalizer. And then it's a great shot by Tierney. That really beautiful in stoppage time. Scotland lead, and then from far out a lob similar to the one by Patrick Schick in the same stadium into the same goal that gave the Czech Republic, I think, a 2-0 win over Scotland. Sends Scotland to the World Cup. I have to say I was so happy about Scotland qualifying, and not only because I have friends, Scottish friends, but also because I really like the story. Scotland is a team that should actually be at the World Cup. I was really excited for them. Not to be outdone, Ireland have not qualified, but what Ireland did was similarly exciting. I mean, they were down and out, but they beat Portugal at home, having Ronaldo sent off in the process as well. And then a crazy game against Hungary, where they turned the game around. I mean, Hungary were, in a way, at some point the better team, but then later on it was all Ireland. They get an equalizer and Troy Parrott scores a hat-trick and a goal that is celebrated in Ireland. Ireland still have to make it through the playoffs to get to the World Cup. I should also mention Italy are not at the World Cup yet, and they have a tough draw for the playoff. Yes, I think they will beat Northern Ireland at home. But them going to Wales and winning there, I don't see it happening. Bosnia, maybe a little bit more. So yeah, it will be another World Cup without Italy. Probably. Absolute disaster. I also should not forget, Austria is through. There are other teams that are through, they have qualified, but I want to really mention the small ones, the Cape Verde Islands, ahead of Cameroon. Major upset with Curacao. I mean, CONCACAF qualification, just watch my videos, was absolutely crazy. Curacao are through. Haiti are through. Major shocks. Major shocks there, and it was actually fun. We also shouldn't forget that Syria and Uzbekistan have for the first time qualified for a World Cup. So congratulations to them as well. World Cup qualifying, especially in Europe, was a drag for the most time, but in the end, it was really exciting. But it was not the top level of international soccer this year. And that top level was reached in the Nations League, the much maligned Nations League, but there was no better international soccer than what we saw in the spring. Already the quarterfinals were sensational. I think we had 3 penalty shootouts, and we had one that was really tight. We had the Netherlands really taking it to Spain, even in Valencia. Spain needed penalties to move on. It would not have been unfair if the Netherlands would have made it to the semi-final. And this is a Spain team that everyone absolutely loved and adored. We had France against Croatia being first down, but then also managing the turnaround and winning on penalties. We had the absolute mad game between Italy and Germany, where Italy were the better team in the first leg, but Germany turned it around. In the end, probably then also a little bit deserved. Lead 3-0 in Dortmund. However, Italy come back to make it 3-3 and almost win that thing and send it to overtime. Crazy stuff. Only the Portugal-Denmark one, even that one got exciting, but that one was maybe the one that led a little bit slide. But then what happened in the Nations League itself in the Final Four in Munich and Stuttgart, and that was a week after the Champions League final, was also remarkable. Germany had a 1-0 lead over Portugal. However, Conceição and Cristiano Ronaldo, who actually was in really good form in this tournament. This is the Cristiano I like. He worked for the team. Yes, he doesn't have the speed and so on. He's just a poacher, but that he did well. And he scored the winner against Germany. Then the absolute mad semi-final between Spain and France, where defending was completely optional. Yes, Spain were running away at one point, but it ends 5-4. Yes, the game was done and dusted, but still, Spain were hanging on. And then France secured third place with 2-0 over Germany. But then the final. I think this was an absolute epic final. If this was a Euro final or a World Cup final, we would be talking about for ages about that one. Great play by Spain. They twice held the lead, even at halftime. Twice Portugal hit back. And again, the equalizer coming through Cristiano Ronaldo. So he did his part, and then it goes all the way to penalties. It was an up and down affair. It was really gripping. Portugal gave counter to Spain and win it then on penalties, because they convert all of them. And who does not convert? Alvaro Morata, the, in a way, tragic hero of Spain, if you would like. Also, coincidentally, it was the last trophy that Diogo Jota won before his fatal accident, which kind of is a little bit of a bummer, if I think about it. We're at number 2 and we're at my team LASK. That year was just nonsensical from wherever you look. And just one stat. We had in this year 4 coaches. However, we finished the year with the most wins of any team in Austria. We're not on top of the table of the year table because of goal difference, because Salzburg have not lost as often. But LASK have the most wins. So overall, it should have been a great year, but it was a wild roller coaster ride. And let me just take you through it, because it beggars belief. It really beggars belief. And it's a little bit like what we saw with Milan. The year started out with a great win in the cup against Salzburg. Finally, you beat Salzburg in quarterfinal. I'm already thinking we are going to the cup final. Yes, it was a difficult semi-final, but it looked advantageous to make it again to the cup final. Then we play against Blau-Weiß Linz, the local rivals, who have been a thorn in our side the previous year. We don't get the win, which means top 6 not likely. However, we were then in position. Blau-Weiß Linz though win in Wolfsburg. Wolfsburg a little bit messing up our season, because they also beat us then in the cup semi-final on penalties. It was an absolute gut punch. We had an early lead. We hung on until very late. There's an equalizer. It goes to penalties and you lose at home. Again, I'm watching LASK in a penalty shootout, I think for the 3rd time live in the stadium. For the 3rd time we lose. Gut punch. I remember my little daughter crying. But in the meantime, we actually had solidified on the coach shop. We started in the bottom group, but we started with 4 wins in a row. Easter hits. Shop was on TV on Easter Sunday saying, yeah, he thinks he has gotten the team now somewhere and he has the full support of the club leadership, only to be fired the day after. That, of course, then ticked the fans off, who already had plenty of troubles. That it first resulted in the next game, which we also won, in a silent protest. They were not saying anything. Then they put up and said, leadership out, Gruber raus. And it got then so ugly that they boycotted the rest of the season. There was no organized support, because so many promises that have been made were not given to them. And yes, some of them were maybe a little bit too high, but whatever. It was absolutely atrocious, and there were some games in there where it was dead in the stadium. However, LASK still win the bottom group, and quite early so. Win also the semi-final against heartbreak, go into the final, win the first leg against Rapid, thanks to Robert Schul, scoring late, 3-1. You think you actually will get into European qualifying, only to lose then at Rapid 3-0. Gut punch again. Gut punch again. I mean, it is so weird how this season was. I mean, it was encapsulated everything. But I said, okay, maybe Europe early in the summer, this is anyway distraction. Maybe it's even better. Make a new start. New coach in. And when Schopp was fired, assistant coach Richard took over. He then actually stepped back again. And João Sacramento came in. Portuguese coach. No one knew how good he was. However, he had quite a good resume. He was an assistant coach for Jose Mourinho at Spurs, assistant coach at PSG as well. Came at Qatar. I don't recall now the name of the coach, but that's the one actually that won the title with Lille. So he was an assistant coach there as well. Worked with Messi, Mbappe, all the great players. Had a great idea of football. The problem is it doesn't work for LASK players. And the start of the season was bleh. Yes, you had only the win against Austria Vienna. You lost against Ried in a way where you dominated. You finally had figured it out and you played great, but you are open on the back. So he was scrambling and shoring itself up, but then you still give up goals, blah, blah. At least you win the derby against Blau-Weiß Linz. But in the celebrations, the Portuguese coaches, the assistant coaches, made kind of fun or, offended the Austrian ones in a group text that should not have gotten there. And so the assistant coach had to be fired, and that caused João Sacramento to step down. Marcel Richter, in again, loses the first game in Wolfsburg. Wolfsburg already twice messing up our season. Under former LASK coach Kübauer, who, he won the cup with Wolfsburg. And, we also have to say the Austrian league, crazy, but I'll get to that at the end. And things did not look well. You're in 11th place. There was the turnaround game. You were down against Hartberg at home, 3-0 in the 89th minute. You manage a 3-3. I would have left. My wife, it was on her birthday. She wanted me to stay. Then is an international break. And what happens? We hire Coach Kübauer again, Coach of the Year, the day after he was voted Coach of the Year for winning the cup with Wolfsburg after ousting LASK, and then almost winning the championship. They were 1 goal away. Yes, they finished only in 4th place and didn't make it in Europe, but they were 1 goal away. The problem is he was only in Wolfsburg, and the means there are not that big, so LASK comes, takes over in 11th place, and what follows is a single draw. I think 8 or 9 wins. LASK went from 11th, second to last, to 2nd on the last match day before the winter break. Beating Rapid Vienna in the first game, 2-0 away from home, but also 3-0 at home. You beat Sturm Graz, the defending champions, 3-1 away from home, and plenty of great wins in there. Even against Hartberg, this was the one game that we didn't win. We were 2-0 down. We had a man less. And we dominated them. We should have won that one. Kalajdzic missed a penalty. Very late on, Usa gets the equalizer. Absolutely crazy. At this form currently, it's bad that there's now a winter break. At this form, LASK would be the championship favorite. Yes, it's a long season still to come, and I don't want to talk about the championship. But I think we are really close, maybe cup, because we play Blau-Weiß Linz at home. Blau-Weiß Linz are a complete mess at the moment, although they have a new coach now as well, so it might turn out the other way. But what a crazy year. And actually the way the year finishes, everyone is looking kind of optimistic again in LASK land. And I have to also say the Austrian league is, yes, the big teams are a mess. Performance in Europe, absolute atrocious. However, and this is the big however, the league is super exciting. That a team can go from 11th to 2nd just tells you how tight it is. And even the team now in 2nd is only 5 points away from 7th spot, which would not mean top 6 and no championship round. So it is also showed in the last match day where 3 teams realistically could go for a title. Sturm Graz won it again, but there was Austria Vienna, there was Wolfsburg in there. Only Salzburg were out of it, and they ended up being in 2nd place. They still have not finished lower than 2nd ever since Red Bull takeover. So crazy in Austria, but I think an even crazier year for LASK. But in the end, it proved once again to be the Champions League that is the pinnacle of the sport, and we probably got a winner that should be considered among the best teams to ever have won the competition. Only the 2nd time that a French team won. We had a final with no German and no English or Spanish team. That is a rarity. But it was everything leading up to that. PSG were really low in the ranking. At one point, it really seemed like they were missing out. Then we were 2-0 down at Manchester City in a crucial matchup, only to turn around 4-2. And Luis Enrique's side suddenly clicked. Then they took on Brest, 10-0 on aggregate. And then they took on the champions, the Premier League. And every single Premier League opponent. It was not always pretty, but they outplayed Liverpool, the league leaders, who at that point started to wobble a little bit, but were still the champions-elect in England at that point. Lost at home, undeservedly, 1-0, but quickly equalized, and then it could have gone either way, and in the penalty shootout, Donnarumma stands tall. The big favourites, Liverpool, are out, the winners of the league phase. PSG show that they are the real deal. Take on Aston Villa then. Outplay them for most of the time. However, it got really, really tight in this final half, where Aston Villa almost had PSG on the edge. Just they could not tip them over. PSG hung on. And then against Arsenal, yes, this was another very open contest, but PSG were brilliant. Goal scoring let them down. Then in the second leg, yes, Donnarumma kept them in play. In the end, PSG go finally again to a Champions League final. But it was actually their opponent that was the real story, because Inter ousted Bayern in already a great game, but then the matchup of matchups. That semi-final, and that's the reason why I put Barcelona and Inter also on this wall, because they deserve to be there. They delivered what I would say the best two-legged matchup of all time. And the crazy thing is that Barcelona, who were the favorites going in, they won La Liga, they won the Copa del Rey, they were a dominant team under Hansi Flick. This was a huge turnaround and should have been a point on its own. It's just it didn't grab me as much, although I have to say that Copa del Rey final, great. That semi-final against Inter, this was so perfect. Two contrasting styles playing against each other. And it always seemed that Barcelona will in the end get the better of Inter, especially in the second leg. But Inter could not be gotten, could not be killed. Inter had a 2-0 lead in Barcelona. I think had a then even managed to get the 3-3, but they took the lead again. In the return leg, they had a 2-0 lead at half-time. Barca comes roaring back, fully in control. Then they take the 3-2 lead. And then the scene that I will remember of that one. Lamine Yamal, best player in Europe, potentially. Ousmane Dembélé was also quite outstanding. So it's between those two. And I think I was happy that Ousmane Dembélé got the credit, because he will not get it again. Lamine Yamal will get it again. Lamine Yamal, you could see the youth showing. He has the ball. Barca lead 3-2. He attacks. He hits the post. He doesn't go for the corner flag. Youthful exuberance. And Inter from that go on. And who scores the equalizer to send Inter into overtime? It's Acerbi. And then Inter win it in overtime. An absolute epic matchup. The final, there was a letdown. Or was it? For a Milan fan, perfect final. Yes, we lost the record. We have beaten Barcelona 4-0 in 94. However, to have a team beating that you actually kinda, sorta, a little bit don't quite fully dislike, at least from my point of view, PSG was always one in my orbit, if you would like, that they take the record off you by beating your city rival 5-0 in the final, in one of the best performances in the final that we've ever seen. Cherry on top. Yes, for many this was a letdown. For me, this was just glorious, because it has been a while since a team that I actively supported won the Champions League. Yes, sometimes the one that I wanted to win won, but a team that I actually really wanted to win from the get-go. They finally won. And they did it so against Inter. 5-0. That felt really good. And what then really was tear-jerking, Luis Enrique, when he unfurled the banner with his late daughter in PSG colors. I still well up on that one. PSG were the team of the season. Their only blip was that they didn't win the Club World Cup. We talked about that already. They just got exhausted into the final, and the exhaustion still shows now in this season. However, if PSG get their act together, they can still be undeniably great. Although, now in the fall, it's Arsenal and Bayern who look arguably greater. And so, these were my memories. What were your best memories from the year? Which memories have you forgotten? Because that's the one thing, I went through many memories and I said, oh yeah, there's this. I should put them into the video. And so this video took a little while to make. But let me know your favorite memory of the past year. And what do you hope for going forward? I have a hope that I might win at least one title for my two favorite teams. Maybe even two. I dare to dream, but not more. I'm not saying they will win. Any case, please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to this podcast if you want to see more videos that are like these. And I'll talk to you soon in more things in my soccer universe. Bye!